Okay, I think that's the music all finished. Sorry about that, everyone. I wasn't able to hear the intro music, but guess what? Welcome to Shiny Side Out with Dave and Mackie, broadcasting from Australia for Revolution Radio on, you guessed it, www.revolution.radio, where it's more than just radio, so jump into the chat room if you can. This is show number 367. Pause for Mackie, who is unavailable today, but he would say 760 and 300. 760 and 300. This is the 8th year on Revolution Radio, and I still enjoy every single minute of it. And thank you for being with us today. Revolution Radio is on air, online, and on your smart device. So grab an app to listen from anywhere, or, and this is included in the anywhere part, or you can listen at home if you're not out and about on a Grace tabletop digital radio. If you missed Solaris' show, which I missed half of it, I'm sorry, Solaris, but it's still an awesome show. She had John Strom on talking about health and healing and spiritual evolution. I think there's a message in that for all of us. As usual, a fantastic show. But if you don't know who we're talking about, if you're only listening to the Shiny Side Out archive, then you don't know who Solaris is. You need to also look at Solaris' shows. And she always has great guests and always great topics. And it's so easy to follow. It's fantastic. And I recommend that you catch her wherever she is. She's awesome. Thank you, Solaris, for warming up the crowd. Crowd. Mackie and I, or as you would know, Shiny Side Out, acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land. Now, where I live, it's the Darkinjung people, or some pronounce it the Darkinjung. And where Mackie lives, it's the Gurug people. And we pay our respects to elders past, present, and future. It's very important to acknowledge that. You should find out who was the custodians of the lands that you live in now, wherever you happen to be. There would have been, before we pushed everybody out, awfully, there would have been, and I feel sorry for that, sorrow and sorry that it happened. I'm so sad that we couldn't find a way to fit in and occupy smaller amounts of the world around in pockets. With today's technology, I'm sure we could live anywhere on the planet, probably even mid-ocean, on a plastic raft that's already there on its own island, almost a whole continent to itself. You know, it's quite possible that all of the oil we have isn't, purely from just happenstance. Oh, it was vegetation that broke down and turned into oil. Maybe it was someone else's junk pile. Their open cut land storage of their waste. I'm not saying human, just their waste, whoever they happen to have been. Because maybe, that goop, whatever that resulting goop turned into, maybe that eventually turns into oil. I don't know. Maybe it's from a former civilization. That'd be an interesting topic, wouldn't it? Anyway, so on these lands that we live, there have been stories passed down from generation to generation for at least 240,000 of those generations. It's been here a while, guys. And I was watching and I always watch YouTube, and I always watch Fox, and I watch CNN, and I watch ABC, our Australian ABC. And I read a lot of the media, and Sydney Morning Herald, for instance, and the Australian. They're both, not, I shouldn't say polar opposites, but they're print media outlets who will I'll get to the point. All media has confessed that they guide the public on behalf of a government message. It's like they live, right? The entire narrative that we live by, while we think we're going as a civilization or a community or a city in a straight line, like we're driving down the road, there's we're presented with 1,000 signs for us to ignore or look at, and each of those are like little guiding taps to keep us going in a straight direction. As you might with holding onto a child's bike for the first time when they go riding. Once you've let go, you might sort of steady it just a little bit and then let go completely, and before the child knows that they've gone quite a ways without you holding on and are surprised by it. Well, they're not going to let us do that part, but they're going to make sure that we go in the right direction. And that control and that self-confessed control of the public through media is not lost entirely on only the media or the controlled media. It is by AI in the current social media platforms is no exception, or are no exception. And the recent things that have occurred in New Zealand, they raise more questions than they deserve. One of the things that our Australian government has done is gone over to New Zealand, awkwardly tried to go in for a hug with Jacinta, that's their Prime Minister. Our Scott Morrison, our unelected leader, he replaced the guy that was the elected leader of that party, and had a really hard time. Bit awkward. What's funny is the Australian government has decided to put laws on Facebook and Twitter and other social media platforms, and the executives that work there have now received a warning from the Australian government over terror posts. Right. So if I have hate speech and all of those things, if I start filming a massacre, for instance, like the alleged perpetrator of the New Zealand alleged massacre, allegedly filmed the event and streamed it live to Facebook. I'm not saying that it didn't happen. I'm just being careful because no court has heard or convicted the fellow yet, even though there's video evidence to suggest that he did it. It's not finished yet, so I don't want to be calling him guilty or the person guilty if they've not been found guilty in a court of law. However, our government is saying that they're going to force the executives in the social media platforms jail time in our country, outside of the jurisdiction of our courts and our country, to put executives from a social media platform that is not registered in this country, who I doubt once they see this will be registered in any country that's extraditable into Australia. They'll find a way of going, oh, well, no, it's I can't for the life of me think of a country that would not have extradition rights to Australia. But what if they found one? That's where Facebook is, and it's certainly going to be tax-free, is going to be registered as being the head office. And good luck with pursuing that then. So it's hot air in a bag is what that is. So our government's trying to look good in front of the people, but really what they're saying is that we condone the filtering of information to our public, the people who live in Australia. So if you condone that, like they've banned already LiveLeak, 8chan and 4chan, for instance, where Q was prevalent in 8chan, having formerly been created in 4chan. In Australia, we cannot get to those websites any longer, and no one complained. Because if you were to make a complaint at the time that they said, and for the reasons they said they were banning those sites, then you would look like you were an advocate. Very clever. They never waste an opportunity. And that's the first thing in government, never waste an opportunity. So they've taken the opportunity to ban websites that if you were to complain about it would make you look like you were a member of the thing, like you were in Australia. That would be not alt-right, but that would be extreme right terrorist. If you were to say, hey, wait a minute, you can't ban 8chan because it's a discussion forum. They go, discussing what? Clearly it's terrorism and you're guilty now for some reason, when you didn't do anything. So no one put their hand up. It's like owning up to someone breaking wind. If you were in an elevator and you broke wind and no one knew it was you, and there's 20 people in there and they're all smelling it, and then someone in the lift says, well, hey, you know what? It's not illegal to fart in an elevator, for instance. Now you weren't the perpetrator, but aren't they going to think that? Right? Poor you, right? Ding, I don't care what floor it is, I'm getting out of that elevator. Mind you, everyone else would have wanted to evacuate the elevator, and the person left who had no thoughts of doing that is the one who probably did it. Anyway, I think it's pretty hard for the government in its capacity to try and... Well, there's an election coming up, by the way, in Australia. A federal election. There was a state election just recently, and it stayed with the incumbent party. Now, like I've said before, and Mickey and I have discussed this, America's right and left aren't the same as Australia's right and left. So the left probably isn't filled with the same kind of people that the left would be in the US, and the right here isn't filled with the same kind of people who are on the right in the US. Our right tends to do everything that was never argued for, they never had a policy for, and they lie to camera, to the people, and then do the exact opposite when they get in. And yet they still get in. Every once in a while they'll get in, then they get out because people realize that they're not that good. And that's democracy, right? So here we have compulsory voting, and you must vote. And the critical part of that is you will get fined if you don't. If they look and your name was never crossed off on any one of the lists on any one of the polling booths in the entire country, because you can do absentee, you can do, the absentees when you vote in a different district. You can also do postal vote, or they call it pre-voting as well. So you can vote in a specific place, but very hard to find, and there's very few of them. So in the end, they should have been able to count all those things up and determine whether you voted or not. I do worry when it comes to voting how many dead people vote. And in the US, we hear it every year, every 4 years, we hear that dead people voted, and yet there's still no fix for that. The list is old, and between the printing of the list and the election, if someone passes away, it doesn't take very much for you just to add those names up and be that person and have a team of people looking after that so they all vote in your favor if you were the leader of the party. And I see that as a thing. Also, postal votes. Surely there's a way of intercepting those and then making them whatever you want if you could intercept them. That's why I believe voting on-prem is the way to do it. Or we should be doing it via Facebook or something, right? So it's legal to have Facebook, but it only handles a certain genre and not certainly the elderly. aren't catered for with Facebook, for instance. But at least the figures, while I don't trust Facebook inherently, I would suggest that outcome or some kind of electronic media would probably be the best way of going forward. Given that, of course, every database could be hacked, and where do I ultimately put all my trust? Probably still in paper and people counting, because the people counting have scrutineers and it's all double checked. And at least I put something on a piece of paper and it wasn't a guess. I didn't draw Donald Duck. I taught my daughter about donkey voting, which is the term for, if you don't know, it's the term for voting in error. You intentionally not voting for anything, writing, some expletive on the voting form, not doing it correctly so that you ditch your vote. The amount of donkey votes or votes that didn't mean anything, the person opens up the piece of paper and sees that they just dropped some of their hamburger sauce on it or something, and they didn't actually vote, and the sauce didn't fall into a box, so they couldn't use that as the thing. So, okay, that's informal voting is what's called. So you put that in a pile of, well, they just failed somehow, right? It isn't difficult. I can imagine. There's even the parties hand out flyers when you walk in, and you get like one from each party. And you can go, okay, if this tells me if I want to vote for that party, this is what I have to do on the piece of paper. Cool. It's not that hard. It's not rocket science. It's not even tying shoelaces difficult. I mean, really. And yet, people still make mistakes. But my greatest fear is that people intentionally gag vote. So they vote for something else because none of the major parties, like the major three, I suppose it would be the right, left and the green, one of those failed to excite them, and so they just chose someone else at random to vote for. When your federal government, not your state governments, but your federal government fails to do what it says it was meant to do, like it set up like an office of itself to be able to manage something. And my specific example is we have some rivers that join into one that come from, say like the middle of the country and flow out down through the bottom of the country. They don't traverse the entire width of the country. It's sort of like almost vertical, but not quite. And it goes through 3 states. The areas where that occasional rain will fall is a huge catchment area, and it has, before farming, was a very living river with tons of fish in it. And now there's parts where there just is no water at all. And we put a management scheme and like a commission, made a part of the government to sell off basically tickets to the amount of water that you can use based on the crop you're growing and how many acres you need to supply water to. So people were pumping water out of the river, and it got so bad that there was no water at all in the river. Like they just sucked the thing dry. And the reason of the commission's, was developed or created in the first place was to ensure that there was, maybe 90% of the river was farmed for water, and 10% could continue to flow through. That would maintain the fauna, the fish stocks, and all of the the knock-on effect biology in the river, to keep it from turning into a blue-green algae bloom or become stagnant pools of water. They failed that, right? And the poor people living around there had no water. And Australia's been in drought for some time, and everyone blamed the drought. But when they've done a quick audit, they've gone, well, you never actually checked to see how much water people were using. Like it was an honour system. People would just say, oh, I've got 10 million acres and I need all the water in the river. Well, you can't have that. Here's a ticket for 2 tickets, right? So you can have so many million megaliters of water annually, and it wasn't metered. And then the river ran dry, and there was nothing. And the fish stocks died, and we had 60-year-old fish dying in the river, which meant that the river had been good for 60 years until this commission turned its back on it and allowed allegedly allowed its farming friends, the big multinationals, to drain the river of all the water so that it could export the net result of that and send it overseas, not even for our own consumption. It's just crazy. Like, the government allowed the river to die and did nothing to stop it, even though they said that they were going to. Maybe I shouldn't be surprised. Maybe this is just something that happens. Maybe I should not be shocked, because I should have expected the government to fail anyway. Because allegedly, I think they may very well be totally incompetent from the get-go, from the start. Maybe it was my fault for putting my trust into the government. And it's not their fault at all. They were always going to fail. Is it just me? Maybe it's just me. I don't know. I'm saying that sarcastically because it was such a had a devastating effect on the fish stocks and the quality of the river that it doesn't look like it's going to return back, even if water started flowing. Because there was just, it killed the fish. Those fish aren't there anymore, right? And the stink that the poor towns that have no water with no rain for like 8 years had to put up with, because you've got rotting fish in green water floated to the top, and there's all the flies and maggots, and it's hideous, right? You can only imagine the poor people having to live around this. And why? Because the government failed. No, I'm not really slamming the government as much as it sounds. Don't hate the government. It's a democracy, so they were voted in, and you have an opportunity to vote them out, and that's what it should be all about. Now, I'll just bring it back to the lawsuit, the possibility of putting the executives from Facebook and Twitter, for instance, on social media, in jail in the event that they allow a terror video to be put onto Facebook or Twitter or the social platforms. Surely that's got to then include the regular media, the television and newsprint media, not video for newsprint, but video, maybe video for newsprint, because they've got a website where the video could end up and be played. Even those beheading videos that appeared completely like green screen videos and done in a Hollywood studio, right? Even those videos were up for 3 days before they were taken down. But it looked to me as though it was only a distribution method of being able to get that video out to all the television stations, and then it was just simply taken down. Oh, sorry about that, didn't mean it. It was from a news station, so everyone goes, oh, it doesn't matter, look, they've got integrity. When you looked at it, they didn't quite get the shadows right. It wasn't quite as bright as it should have been. There was no reflective material reflecting this on the sand, right? It just wasn't at all convincing. And yet, that was allowed to go out. Now, if the television media played the video, would that then mean that the executives of the television station would have to go to jail too? Or what about in Australia? I'm sure in the US that you have your and these are restricted to AM radio. That still exists here, right? So there's AM and FM. But in AM radio, we've got these shock jocks who are very, in our country, very right-wing. I mean, you could call them alt-right or something like that. But remember, our right-wing isn't your right-wing. I'm not saying they're Trump-supporting kind of people, because the Americans' right-wing would be Trump, and then, Hillary would be left. In our country, the people on the left support more from the people's perspective, and the right support more corporate perspective. And in that way, we've been able to achieve some public holidays which have come up, and we've got some great rights at work. So we've got 4 weeks leave a year. We don't have free healthcare at work because that was a healthcare company drive to get more subscribers onto their brand of healthcare. But what we've got is free healthcare, and there's no gap. You don't have to pay. You just use your government card and you can get healthcare. Doesn't matter, right? If you earn more money, you have to put more money into it than a regular person, the majority of people. But for everyone else, even unemployed people, you have the right to medical care. So these kinds of things came from our left, and the right tried to privatize health and made it so expensive that no one could buy it. And it wasn't work supported. But in competition to something that was currently free and working just fine, that didn't seem like the right way to go. But then they had to legislate it because no one was signing up to it, so that if you earn over a certain amount, then you're compulsed to get the paid health care. However, the paid health care isn't, you don't just pay that amount and then you're good to go. You pay that amount, you get your medical services, and then you've got to pay more money again because they charge you much more on top of what you're already paying. It's like if you had a traffic accident and they go to fix your car, and they're about to hand you back the car again, and they go, well, here's the bill. And you go, but wasn't it fully insured? You go, oh yeah, fully insured. Absolutely fully insured. Don't you worry about how insured it was. It was insured. You couldn't get any more insurance on it, but we've got a bill for you. So here's the bill. You've got to pay the bill or you won't get your car back. And what do you mean? It's thousands of dollars. Oh yeah, it's thousands. Everyone has to pay the thousands of dollars on top of their healthcare. What? So we call that, they even advertise it as no gap, but there is a gap between what you pay, what you receive, and this extra charge for some reason. It's like going to a restaurant on a public holiday and they charge you a surcharge for that holiday for some reason. Like it's already expensive, or even worse, you've got a bottle of wine on your table, like it's a nice dinner, right? But they said you can bring your own if you like, and then they charge you to open the wine with a bottle opener. It's called corkage. There's even screw top wine, right? How sophisticated does that sound? I may as well bring a box of wine. Well, I don't want to pay the $15 corkage fee, so I'm going to undo I'll break open the box of wine and pull the nozzle out myself if you save $15. I mean, the box of wine didn't even cost $15. Or the screw top wine, $8.99 a bottle. Well, $15 just to unscrew it for, no thanks, I'm fine. So it's kind of the same thing where you've already paid, but then they charge you even more. And for instance, I know someone recently who cut their hand and they needed some stitches, and they had some stitches, and when they got home it was, I'm just throwing a number out there, it was like $6,000 or something for some stitches. That's insane. We go to the hospital and they go, oh look, you cut yourself, and we'll cleanse it, stitch it, and you can just go home when we're done. You can show your friends too, but don't get it wet, and keep this padding on it for a couple of days and come back if it hurts or it starts to to swell up or go red or anything like this, and apply this stuff to it. And you go home and there's no bill. So if you would like to live in a world where you had to pay through the nose just to get regular services, and one where that service was free, and you don't have to line up for 3 years to get a bicycle with the wheels that are already inflated, right? Australia's the place then. I was frightened. I had an ingrown toenail when I was living in the States, and I had to seek medical attention because it was infected and I was having a hard time with it. And that cost thousands then of just seeing the doctor. That was thousands. And then the other one was when they cut a little V in the front of my toenail. And he said, that's going to have to be all I can do without surgery. And then that was thousands of dollars. I could have cut the V myself. I saw what you did. If there was YouTube, I would have looked it up and gone, oh, that's all you have to do. But look, I'm not bagging the US out, I promise you. It's just a really hard place to come from. And my example was basically showing you left from right. So we've got these shock jocks who promote Islamophobia, and I think promoting anything that appears as though it's white supremacy is probably not a good thing, because we're forced in Australia and other parts of the world are by way of living in that country that has a multicultural philosophy, you are forced to accept everything around you. I'm not saying I don't accept it. I'm just saying it's harder for some others than it is like for me, for instance. I'm fine with it. I really don't care who lives where. I'm under the impression that everyone could live anywhere on the planet and there shouldn't even be borders. And as long as who's on B and who's on A, Gin 2017, it's Dave from Shiny Side Out. Shiny Side Out is on A. And you'll know me in this chat room by Narara. So, and welcome to Shiny Side Out, by the way. So, it's quite a challenge for some people, especially those who live not in the cities and in places where you may see very little of anything but white people. So if you're in a country town, there might be a Chinese takeaway store run by a family of Asians who moved there a long time ago. I'm not being awful, just saying, because that tends to be that. Or there's an Italian restaurant and it's run by an Italian family who moved here a long time ago. Or there's a Greek restaurant with the Greek family who moved here some time ago. And when it's a few people, you might find that they'll like the ways of the country they moved to. And slowly, after a couple of generations, will just be as dinky die or as dinky die Australian or as united with the country that they're living in. Like, for instance, if I moved to Japan, I might immediately seek some more Australians as company. I might find that company becomes less and less important over time, and my next generation who grew up there in tight binds with other students of Japanese students may find there is no difference in people are people and doesn't matter, and they may assimilate a lot easier than maybe I would at my age. So that's what I'm trying to suggest. So our government, the current government, in all of its best intentions, have nominated, if they get into power, what they're going to do is put all the immigrants into the country towns. Just move them there. That's where they're going to settle. They're going to settle in those towns and make it better. But unfortunately, it's the towns themselves who aren't that familiar with people from other lands. And I think that's probably not the right way to go. The cities themselves are a lot more multicultural, and there may be some reason and some argument behind maybe reassessing their best intentions. I would hate it to go the wrong way. I'd hate it to be the family who were forced to move into a town of people who resented the fact that you were there. I think that would be so awful. And see, that's what I'm trying to put on this argument, is the both sides argument. I understand the government was trying to do something somewhere positive, but they chose, I think, the wrong approach to doing it. And the people who would be at the receiving end of it would probably be least likely to accept it. And the poor people having to do it would probably have to, at least you would employ like a psychologist to see weekly with all of the negative impacts that would have on your life. But the only benefit would be that the children would probably be the best off. I don't know. Like it's a very tough subject. I'm not a person who is against multiculturalism. I think it's fantastic. I think if we could all live like it was better than Deep Space Nine, the entire genre of that in the Gene Roddenberry series, I didn't think that was. I think that's sort of stated more like it was New York than a space station in the middle of space where everyone has the same thoughts and behaviors. But I think the Gene Roddenberry series of Deep Space Nine showed us is that it's not an easy trot, this multiculturalism, and everyone's got to give it a real hard go. Otherwise it fails for everybody. It doesn't just fail for the people who it's intended to benefit. So, but I'll move on. So my point was, I'm all over the place today. My point was about Ray Hadley and Alan Jones, our two shock jocks. Would they also be forced with jail time if they were to support the things they currently talk about, and to the people they currently talk to who support their message? And that message can be very polarizing. So if I was to say the same things that they would say, Nighthawk would cut me from the station straight away. And I don't say the things that those two say. And they're highly paid. They're on $500,000 each or something, right? On the same station or thereabouts, or competing station. I don't listen to them. I listen to them occasionally if I'm driving. I want to know what is being presented to the people as the common thought, because that's what they do. They pick a news story and they only let the people through who support it, which is confirmation bias. And anyone who calls up and is negative to their message, they cut them straight away off air. It's really bad radio. But for the people who support him, they're like, yeah, I want more of that. So it's like a rioting audience who are at home doing nothing. But he riles them up to the point where he gets his message across. And he actually thinks that way. It's something else. I mean, in this day and age, I think that his message was probably, 40 years old. Possibly 50. With all of the polarization that occurred at the end of the last World War and during the Cold War. Right now we're seeing mixed messages about China, and I've got something about them before the break comes. I'll start there right away. So China has, as we've just discovered now in Australia, China has built a number of, there's a couple of Antarctic bases that they've built. Let's put it that way. However, one of them is actually on the Australian designated territory. So how are we going to deal with that? How is Australia... It only came up yesterday or 2 days ago or whatever it was. It wasn't 3 days ago max, right? Maybe Friday. And they discovered that with a flyover that, hey, wait a minute, isn't that still our territory? Yes, it is, sir. Well, whose base is that? That's China's, sir. Really? How could they build on our land? Well, our ice sheet. Well, maybe, I don't know. We'll find out. I'll get back to you. So that is, it's something else. And nothing was said until yesterday about this. And apparently, I've got the news story here, but I know I won't read it out to you. But it was, there's a lot of criticism over China's building of it, because all the countries that have a base in Antarctica, that participate in an Antarctic treaty governance, and this is all about who can build there, who can go there, and it's very important that everyone adhere to that. So that it looks like, I don't want to read the story out. I'm just really annoyed by it. It comes from one of our trusted and well-balanced news outlets, and it doesn't say. Oh, here's a quote. It says, "Why this is all important is because of the GPS systems of China, Russia, and the US. In a time of war, they become really crucial. They're used for missile timing and positioning." There's an argument in here that that they're so close and being able to jam anything. If they built anything in those bases that at some point could be used for jamming, it's crazy. I'm astounded that they would allow this kind of thing. Anyway, but you and I can't go. You and I, listener and myself, we can't just go, oh, let's get a boat and go down to Antarctica. You've got to fill in not just forms, but you have to gain permission like it's a visa country. But you're not allowed to go anywhere that you want when you get there. It's not like a tourist visa. Say, oh, I just want to traipse around for a while. No, where are you going to go precisely? And on what days? What's your travel plan? So that they can go, well, no, you're not allowed there or there. And there's off limits. And you go, but so I'm still on the boat. Yeah, that's perfectly fine. Yeah, don't step onto the Antarctic continent unless it's the Australian base, in which you're not allowed to enter the base, but you can be on the land only if we say you can. That's just nuts. You go, oh, I want to take an ultralight and fly around for a while. No, you can't do that. No, it's a closed airspace. Good luck. So with all of that closure and the secrecy, when we don't know what's going on, we tend to make up stories about what's going on. We tend to creatively contribute towards a pool of ideas which becomes its own living beast. I'd like to believe that there was a German base down there. I'd like to believe that possibly Hitler lived for a long time down there. I'd like to see that Admiral Byrd was right before he apparently went mad and died. I'd like to know that some kind of war or fight happened, and maybe it was with what we'd probably call Terrans, people who lived here before humans, possibly in an Antarctic base or an underwater bases or whatever. If all of that stuff became true, but we don't know. It's like when you're kids and you walk down the street and there's a house that's really creepy, and then you start making stories about it being haunted, and there's like this mystery people that live there, but then they come out at night time when you're not outside, and so you could never have known about it. And then you pass that around, and like that game where the story changes and you pass one story to the next and you add a little bit. Against your best intentions, you add a little bit and you change it and it becomes a different story. And it balloons and it's its own life form then, right? And it gets retold. Maybe that's what's happening. I don't want to be the person who's a naysayer who says, oh, conspiracies aren't true. No, it's research which is true. We should change the name of ourselves from conspiracy theorists to researchers and theorists. Because you research something, you get a certain amount of data, and then you are able to theorize in the gaps. Because the facts stand up on them by themselves. Maybe you could tie a bunch of them together, then it becomes a theory because they don't have direct links, and then you can narrate a story around it, and then that becomes something. Like JFK was not killed by a magic bullet. That's preposterous. Bending a spoon with your mind is impossible. Just remember, there is no spoon. From the Matrix quote. The idea that the Antarctic has, German base and alien bases, it's anecdotal. But I'm still going with it until proven otherwise. There's so much. Let me leave it as 5:52. So it's 5:52 p.m. on a Sunday here. We're coming up to the break, which is very close. And I'll suggest that we need to donate to the station. We need to donate to the station and its operations, I heard Nighthawk say recently. But you can do that by subscribing to the archives, which is really good, and I do it already. It's only $5.95 or a month, which for me is like the coffee I have, the triple shot coffee I have a couple of days a week. Or you can get a big seed pack, but remember, you've got to be in a country that won't zap them with gamma rays, right, when they come through and they become dead. They've got to be accepted by the customs in your country. We can't bring seeds in here, so it's a shame. But there's other offers. Even you should see Nighthawk, the station owners. You see his woodworking skills. They're unbelievable. And I would recommend that you purchase some of his gear. Once again, we can't bring wooden artifacts into the country without freezing them for a while. So if that's not going to hurt it, then that would be all right. But otherwise, if you're landlocked to the US, certainly by all means, take the opportunity and have a look through Revolution Radio's website for more details on donating, on purchasing something and receiving a gift in return, or subscribing to the archives. I recommend it. So one of the last things I'll mention right before the break, I don't know if the break music comes on, because I'm not sure I can hear it today. So if you could, can you announce to me in the chat room, just type the word music when you hear the music. So there was a lady in Bangladesh who gave birth, and then there was 2 more babies inside her waiting to be born, and they were hidden away inside what she didn't know, but she had a second womb. And they were born about a month later from each other, 26 days later. So the story quickly says, in a case that has stunned the medical world, the woman, Arifa Sultana, 20 years old, gave birth to a healthy twins, a boy and a girl, about 26 days after giving birth to a premature baby boy. It's crazy. It's a rare incident, says one of the doctors. I've seen such a case for the first time. I hadn't ever heard about such an incident before, she says. Oh my goodness. What a surprise. Surely you'd leave the hospital with your premature boy and go, I think I'm still pregnant with more, surely. She must have been quite larger as a result of still having twins still inside her. Wow. That's something. It's a real thing that happened. So I've got less than a minute left. What I'll do, I'll wait for the rest. If you're listening to this right now, Revolution Radio, you're welcome to join me after the top of the hour for a discussion forum where we can discuss topics, given we're talking about the right things. Maybe have a round table or throw some ideas around and we can have some feedback on them. All right. I'm going to suggest the music's going to start any second. Looking for the word music in the chat room so I don't talk over the music. Anyone? Bueller? Anyone? No one? Let me test it. Takes like 30 seconds now for that to crank in. Have to thank you very much, Gino 2017. Catch you after the short station break, everyone. You're welcome to join me after the top of the hour.
They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
You're back with David Mackey's Shiny Side Out on freedomslips.com on the #1 listener-supported talk radio on the net. So push the donate button or subscribe to the archives for only $5.95 a month. I'd like to say hello to all of the new listeners we have today. We're glad you're on board. So whether you follow, subscribe, or otherwise, we hope that your journey is a reasonably intelligent journey with us. We hope we make this an easy transition from wherever you come from to wherever we're going. So strap yourself in tight. This is a tinfoil hat zone. We do. You're back with David Mackey's Shiny Side Out on freedomslips.com on the circle. So, where was I? This is show number, we're halfway through show number 367. That is, in Mechie speak, 760 and 300. I have to close my eyes and do that and count the numbers backwards. Mechie can't be with us today. He's out and about. He said if he's able to, he'll dial in. But it looks like he may not be able to do that from where he is. And so it becomes a Dave show. Who's Mechie? I don't know. Only kidding. I used to watch, there was a gag on one of the shows I used to watch when I was a kid. When it came back from break and it was only one of the hosts on, they used to that gag every single time. It was very funny. I always found it funny. Now, I'm going to put the invitation out there for anyone who would like to join me on air to call in, and I'm not currently aware of the numbers to dial in on. If I know that you can dial directly to my number within the US, which is 347 688 2912. 347 688 2912 is my Skype number to call. So you may call and I'll add you to the call. That's cool. So what I'm looking for is people who are willing to have a good discussion with me. If you know my Skype name, you can add me and dial in also, or you can call the Revolution Radio switchboard on Skype, if you know what that is, and you're able to connect to me that way. It should get forwarded to my Skype call and I'll see it calling. So you're more than welcome to do that. Next. So, thanks, Amiga. when Mackie's not on board because of his mobile service without his good internet, there's usually some audio lag between him and I. We did one show and we never were able to get the recording because it happened to be during a daylight saving change and the recording was never done. But we were in the same room for the first time in 8 years. I think 7.9 years at that point. It was a great show too. And we're able to bounce off each other because we also use visual cues to be in the same room to indicate whether someone was going to jump into that conversation or not. But when it's audio only, I think you have to have an acute awareness of the other person's speech habits. And sometimes it's very, very difficult to get your point across. So while we're on air normally, we chat to each other in a messaging platform so that if I have an idea while he's doing a large rant, he can just simply add those ideas into the rant. And I mean that with all sincerity, because I do the same thing. We have a soapbox. When we're soapboxing, not a rant, not specifically a rant, but more soapbox. So he'll do the same thing when I'm talking, and I do the same thing when he's talking. But you know, a lot of the time, I feel as though I tend to cut his point off by trying to insert another idea in there, and I know doesn't always work, and he doesn't always get back to the point that he was on. And I don't want it to be butterflies in the room. Hang on one sec. Let me see if I can add to call. Yep, there we go. I found the right button to push. And yeah, that's good. So one sec, new caller. And so one of those things that happens with me is that I try just to message him, and then you'll hear Mackie say something like, "Yeah, that's right, Dave," and he won't give the point away. And then when he finishes his, he can throw it to me. But it doesn't always work that way, and I feel sometimes all the time I feel really bad when I feel as though I've cut the point away from him. It's just awful. I'm so sorry, Mackie. When he listens back to the show, he'll hear those apologies. Right. So we've got one caller so far. Aussie Paul, welcome to Shiny Side Out. It's been some time. Aussie Paul? Hello? I know you're there. You're probably
sorry.
You're muted, right?
I love the mute button on when it goes to the dark screen. You know, back in the day, it used to be the green screen of death.
Yeah, that's right.
And you got to go, and then you got to go, oh, bugger, and quickly flick through it and go, oh, there you are. Anyway, how are you going?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well. Yesterday was raining like there was no tomorrow, and then today was so lovely. It was a beautiful day. Cool winds, though, the coldest day we have this year so far. But I'll tell you, there's a thing called the Central Coast Cars and Coffee, and it's car enthusiasts only, with no burnouts and no donuts and no misbehavior, just taking nicely presented cars from every era of the automobile history, with fan built cars, like movie prop cars, like the Pursuit cars, the yellow Ford Pursuit cars from Mad Max 1. And
I've got a friend who lives down the road, actually, who still has an original one that's not done. It's a nice black one. You know,
nice.
The Mad Max.
Yeah, the Mad Max car.
Two-door, the two-door Ford Coupe.
Yeah, the two-door XB Ford Coupe, which is so sought after. Now the untouched shell is worth more than $100,000. So if you can find an XB shell in good nick, there's 100K straight in your pocket.
I'm not saying where he lives, so that's
No, that's fine. But one of the other vehicles before the Mad Max car is revealed in the film, there's yellow pursuit vehicles, which take out a couple of the, protagonists in the movie. It's classic, and I think it was, not Loop and Charlie, their car, which is the one that busts through the
the 4-door.
It's the 4-door version, and it busts through the caravan, and the guy gets a saucepan in the throat. But we're still mobile. The replica of the car before the accident is the one that I saw today, and it looks fantastic. But then if you're into Australian muscle cars, especially the racing versions, the Australian supercar series of the 05 Brock Commodores in different eras were all presented there. So people have made these cars on their own, painted them up with the same livery, which is the paint job, with all the sponsors and everything, and their names on the windows and everything, and they had those on display. In America, it would be the same as by being able to create your same NASCAR car in real life, but not had staggered wheels and be able to have it as your daily drive to and from work.
It wouldn't have the actual wheels that come off and on so quickly, and
no,
there's be a few little minor.
It would have actual headlights,
like it would actually all work and be heavier.
Yeah, but that's what the fans do. The fans here do that. They create cars, and there's a lot of cars that have been modified cars, but they're not drag cars. These are just cars that have been souped up and modified. So there was around between 500 and 1,000 vehicles. We lost count, so we started estimating. We couldn't really estimate with any certainty. So that's a really good turnout. Even the police turned up with a BMW version of their pursuit car. The real police did this. And they had another one as well, one of the old Commodores. And they were showing their cars off. And then before everyone left...
They always do.
Yeah. And then before they left, they went out at the car park and just went up the street a bit and waited for the people to leave doing burnouts and driving too fast and booked them all.
Of course. Yeah. In Victoria, we had something similar, but it was a drag car called Old Smoky.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Yeah.
Because Smokies used to be,
the police from Smoking
police
the Bandit.
Yeah, back in the day. And, so they had the nitrous fuel oxide car that used to do up and down Calder Park.
Yeah, right.
But they don't really have... and then they put out the police pursuit cars with a ethanol burning car on the odd occasion, to show the proper highway pursuit cars.
Wow.
Like a brand new Holden and this and that. And, not far off keeping up compared to,
Well, if we entered today into the same dystopian world that was in Mad Max, the car would not be a Ford 2-door coupe. It would be the Commodore, the last of the V8s.
Oh, no.
Would be a Commodore. Right now they're running the Stingers, the Kia Stingers. So
it wouldn't.
What would it
be? It'd be a Toyota Hilux with a Commodore running gear through it.
I said, no, that's funny. That's actually pretty funny, because the one that they turned up today was a modified V8, a VE Commodore with a V8, and it was nice. There was we noticed a big difference in the V8 sound between the old school V8s that were up until about the 90s to the modern exhausts, and they sounded, how you're I don't know, if you're not a car fan, right?
I'll explain it.
I'm talking white noise, right? Yep.
Yeah, I'm a mechanic, so I can explain it in layman's terms. Non-pollution gear before the 80s, you could almost get away with everything. And
Yeah.
in Australia, if you've still got that and keep it all rigid edge, you still can get away with it. Up for, what is it, the 86 onwards was pollution gear on almost everything. And then catalytic converters come in. Center point injection come in. And then we had multi-point a few years later. So it was funny growing up around them eras trying to, we had aspirated, then center point injection.
NA,
And
that's right.
Yeah.
So center point, is that the inlet or the
no, that's
cylinder
actually going
injection?
down. Now, you get your old carburetor.
Yeah. Oh,
you
right.
And you put 2 injectors down the throat. And that's what it was.
Yeah, right. Okay. Because now the Commodore that I'm running is only from 2002. It's a VY.
Yeah, but that's a rail. Yeah, that's a rail. That's multi-point injection.
Yes, that's right.
That's fuel.
I've got fuel rails. Listen to Aussie Paul go, man. You're awesome. So that injects into the path of the oxygen before it goes into the cylinder.
That's correct.
It doesn't go directly into the cylinder. So it's right before it. And I think, look,
Yeah.
it's also electronic timing too on the engine.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is fun when we put LPG, which is really getting almost non-existent in Australia.
Yeah,
And
right.
we pioneered it. We made multi-point injectors to mimic what the petrol injector does
Oh, wow.
via timing. So, and that actually come from Enzo
Ferrari. Yeah, wow.
Yeah,
Okay, I didn't know that.
over in Italia, in Italy. Every single modern day injection system that you see was actually roughly done by Enzo and a couple of people in Australia. And I can say it, Boemo Engineering was one of the first to start it off and make all the stuff, safety and everything else to do with testing of gas tanks for Australian standards and the whole lot. So that was funny as. And
Awesome.
I worked for them once upon a
Oh,
time.
really?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know what I'm talking about. And yeah,
So that it's totally amazing. Totally amazing. Great info. So look, I'm quite the car buff. You've probably never heard me ever talking about it on air, but I seem to find that it's a great escape for me to be able to work on a car. And if I was in the US, I think I'd be hard pressed to pick a favorite. But because I'm more General Motors than I am Ford, but I do like the 65 and 67 Mustang. But I'm quite the modern Camaro fan rather than the modern Mustang. Don't hate me, just the way I am. I think I'd be torn. I've always loved the American muscle car because we didn't really have an advertised muscle car in Australia, though our cars were made to go up and down a hill, tight bends, turn, stop, go. And the Bathurst race was the signified, a glorified version of our cars. But after, I think it was 2006 or something like that, that they started to not use the car body anymore and started to make regulations where they would just have a general car body and they would put any car panels on it, like you build a NASCAR, right? It's not really the car that people drive. It's not the frame that the people drive. But before then, back when the 2002 series was running, the car that I own today was the one that they ran on the track. I'm not saying I own a track car. I'm saying that it was the chassis, including all the panels that they ran, that was identical. All they did was put a roll cage in it, right? And they they beefed up the motor and the suspension, everything, and the tires. But it was the car that won. You could go down and pretty much buy the street version of it. I think it was pretty cool. And that got lost a number of years ago, and sadly...
The kit car. Yeah, there's such a thing called a kit car. You could actually get a VW engine and make
Yeah, that's right.
a few other
I
variants.
nearly did that, with the Lamborghini. Because I know
Yep.
there was a Lamborghini kit car back in the 80s, which was the Countach shell with a space frame over a VW floor pan, including engine and suspension. And I nearly did it. I'm sure it would
wouldn't
never have
mock
been
any
registered
of
in this country, but
Yeah, but I wouldn't mock too much about the V-dubs because some of them V-dub engines, you can actually buy a kit for aeroplanes. So if they put an adaptation aeroplane kit
yeah.
into that V-dub, and also because it's in the car, there's a couple of things you can do. You can put a couple of little pieces and make it radiate a little bit from the exhaust,
Yeah, right.
and yeah, keep it cooler.
Mhm.
But yeah, no, there's an aeroplane kit that goes straight onto whichever Volksy that you still have today.
Wow.
They cost about as long as you do it correctly. Oh my goodly gosh, you've got a brand new high performance V-dub engine.
Because I've seen higher compression kits, and there's some extra work that you can do to the engine. I was always a fan of the how robust those engines are. Right, the V-dub engine. In Australia, there was a nickname for it when I was growing up and going through school, and it was Dak Dak, because that's the sound like it made when it was idling. Dak 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 Dak. It's very it's a sound that you just know when you hear it. However, it's not the way it is when it's a full performance version.
Or when you see one, punch buggy.
Yeah,
I grew up with a brother and sister, so I was the middle, and it was fun.
Oh wow!
So punch Volkswagen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've seen a Leyland P76 alloy block V8 in a VW, and it could stand up, right? On its, it would have so much power that it would stand up. It used a Porsche.
It'd be hard to keep.
On the ground. Yeah,
you need people inside and the lead weights under the hood just for the engine.
That's right.
Otherwise, it would stand up anyway, let alone the power.
Just idling it would
Just the
stand
mass
up.
of the engine.
Oh yeah, just the mass of the engine would make the front wheels comes off the ground. But it was using a Porsche transaxle, and I've seen also people put the Porsche engine in the VWs, and I've had a friend of mine who he changed the stance of it. This was back in the 80s. He was a bodybuilder when I was doing that, and he had a lot of time to work on it. That's all he did was bodybuilding. So when he wasn't doing that, he was working his car, and he had a tremendous looking V-dub, and I've never seen anything like it since. Today I saw a car where the fellow had spent more than $100,000 on a VW, and it looked mint. And I thought, that's very expensive polishing compound, because the car looked, immaculate. But he assures me that most of that was labour cost, and the entire car was stripped down to individual pieces, and then every piece was hunted on the internet for the best version of that piece, and then replaced out. And
did he paint it, or was
it was painted in the original color again,
okay,
and then reassembled. So it's as mint as it could ever be if it rolled directly out of the showroom. And
lovely.
Yeah,
did you know in Mexico in Mexico they still do make them, or did they shut down a couple of years ago? I'm not too sure.
I'm not sure myself, but I was astounded, absolutely astounded to hear that he'd spent so much money. But when you think about $100,000, maybe it's a year's work from a mechanic that's billing you.
Oh, definitely. No, well, if he's a sprayer and this and that, but
That's
it's an individual person doing the time. If you put 20 people on it, it would have been done in, months,
2 weeks or
not
something,
even,
right? Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd say months, because you've got to do this, that, the other, and
And
I
there's
know
shipping for components.
Well,
Having
that's
something
what-
that was so worldwide, there was a VW in every country. So, a lot of those succumb to traffic accidents, but they end up at the wreckers, and then it's just parts on a shelf in a plastic bag getting dust on it. Who knows, right? And you can re-chrome most stuff.
Well, I got a brand new VW combi van Speedo cable. They
Yeah,
still
right.
make certain parts.
Yeah,
But
right.
yeah, like I said, panels and this and that, it could be a little bit more difficult to find straight ones.
Yeah.
But like you said, in our wreckers, they're fantastic on what you can actually find.
Oh, I know. I've restored my car from parts from a wrecker that I use all the time, and I'm not afraid to say their name, Commodore Bits, and they're at Morisset. They're a 20-minute drive from my house, and they'll usually source it. If they don't have it, they'll source it, and that's fantastic. So my car has come to life again. It was at the point of suggesting maybe I should just drive it to the metal recovery place and have it crushed. That's how bad it had gotten. And now it's alive and well, and it's got a new life. And that's the thing. While I went to this, it's like not a car show. It's just enthusiasts getting together, right? So I fell into this group, and it's actually an eye opener to see what other people have been able to achieve with their cars. So, if you're listening, I'm a car fan. I really like cars, and I sort of been keeping this hidden for some time. My partner bought me one of those the V8 supercar drives, where I can drive a V8 supercar around a racetrack. And I sort of got the bug again, because it had been gone from me for 20 years or 30 years, and I managed to get the bug again, and that's great. But what I used that racing bug for was to drive in a motorsport simulation. So the motorsport simulation is called iRacing, and I don't have to spend $1,000 for a track day. I spent $1,000 pretty much all up on equipment. So I've got a wheel and pedals, or inverted pedals and all that stuff. While it might sound boring to you if you're listening to this, it's just pursuing a hobby. So I pursued a hobby of being able to drive a V8 supercar in a series against other people, and I came first in my division in the last season. And there's a new season this year that I'm driving in, and it's going well. I've even managed to source myself sponsorship. So you might even know the name of this company. It's Mace Engineering. So performance parts out of Melbourne. So Mace Engineering now sponsor me to drive my V8 supercar in a sports simulation, and it's fantastic, and I really appreciate their help. They've been fantastic. Why are you showing me video? Hey. So yeah, it's been fantastic, and I really do thank them very much. And it's something I'm really I'm back into again. A lot of the V8 supercar drivers in real life also drive in this motorsport simulation to train, but they also drive to compete. And they're just as competitive as they are in the simulation as they are in real life. And one of the names, Paul, you might know, Marcus Ambrose.
Oh, cool.
So he's driving
so
there.
You're, so they're little cockpit
is there as
and
well.
You take your steering wheel and you go into a cockpit idealism.
Yeah, well, I have one in my house. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Oh, okay. Yeah, I understand.
I built that so that I can drive. It doesn't look like a real car. And I'm not using
It's not just the
VR.
feelings there.
I'm not using
Yeah,
VR
it doesn't-
helmet, but it doesn't have to be. So I've set the pedals to feel like my real car with spring tension and the amount of effort on the brake pedal, and
Beautiful.
everything
So,
else.
yeah, make it
Everything
feel-
else is
yeah, Make it
fantastic.
feel more natural. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm using muscle
Sensible.
memory. So when
Yeah,
I'm
that helps, doesn't it?
when I'm in my real car, I've got the same experience, but I'm not driving my real car like a racing car. I just drive my real
like
car
a hoon, yeah.
normally.
Yeah, like a hoon.
No, I don't
and if
actually.
the tire blows out on the stimulation, you won't die. So,
I do stack a lot, especially in practice,
but yeah, that's the fun part about driving simulations.
but it doesn't cost me
Push it.
anything. It doesn't cost me a
doesn't
cent to
cost-
stack, right?
Nothing. You just hit the reset button, and no hospital trips or nothing. You know.
No, that's right. So in real life, my team boss would have sacked me 1,000 times already. Right? For just pushing a car. What are you pushing a car so hard for? Well, it's a simulation. Is it? Is it really? So in real life, he would have slaughtered me. Look, but outside of that, one of the things that I wanted to bring up was something we talk about all the time on Shiny Side Out. Something Meki and I talk about all the time, and that is there was a post recently about depression, and I just want to hit reality for a minute, right? Because there's a lot that leads into it, and there was an article about England having 70 million people in England prescribed and currently taking prescription antidepressants. And I went, wow, that's a really big number. Like, for England, that's a really big number. It's not everybody,
Yeah.
right? It's not everybody there, right?
Almost, though.
Yeah, it's not like the whole country's taking them. So there's some people who've never heard of them. But this is the thing, and I started thinking about it. This is since the last show, and I was thinking, what is it? What contributing factors can there possibly be that we could consider maybe being vectors towards needing to take prescribed antidepressants? And I started thinking about it. I categorized them into a couple of sections here. So I've got, basically the lives we lead. So whatever life you're currently leading is a vector,
I agree.
right?
That could be absolutely.
On its own, but contributing
Yeah, that's right.
factors,
Yeah, with nothing,
no other input.
whilst going about your own life.
Yep. You can just encounter stuff that makes you depressed, right? That's fine. The messages we encounter, so every single day, what kind of messages do we encounter? Whether it's, social media or face-to-face, or your interactions with your friends, or your boss, for instance, or if you've got employees that, if you're a manager or someone who has employees, are they easy to manage? Are there unrealistic expectations on you? Is your relationship? These are the kinds of things I started to delve into, and I thought, well, all of those are, they're all must be vectors, right? Because they all leave you with something, right? What about the media narrative? So,
when they actually say that something should go wrong when it doesn't, or
they're painting a picture of the world that you may not like, or maybe it negatively impacts your emotions, right?
like a little puppy, being born. Yeah, isn't that
that's
cute?
so cute.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, like that type of scenario. Oh, yeah.
But it could be the other way around. Maybe the media.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Now the poor puppy died.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Right. So
And-
maybe it's the perpetual endless war, this war on terror. And maybe it's that the hammer sound they play on Fox News. The war on terror. Boom.
Yeah, boom, boom.
Maybe
yeah.
it's a design sound. Maybe it's the media's design around keeping us in a state of fear. Maybe I don't know. Right? So I figured that there's got to be some input from the media. There's also our extremely, and this is a dig at our government, our extremely poor government performance. Their track records are so atrocious that they're not in power for long enough to have a long-term view. So that our government, who's trying to get re-elected, is starting to hand out gifts of money to people, to pensioners and war veterans right before the election, saying we're going to give you $1,000 each or whatever the amount is. Just vote for us. Right?
No, it's $70 off your bill.
$70 off your electricity bill, right? Isn't it? Or something like that.
Once.
Yeah, once, just a one-off. Yeah. We're not going to make it better. In fact,
mind you, yes, it's going up after we give you that little
That's
supplement.
right. We'll get the money back anyway. Don't worry about it. But, so also...
But now, this is the kick of it.
That?
It's to the neediest of the Australians who don't have the pay their bills anyway. So
that's right.
That's quite amusing.
Yeah, that's true. And I was also looking at the poor government performance, not only in their election promises versus their output, whether they were successful in accomplishing those promises, but more so also in their inability to work with the other governments of the world successfully enough for us to have all balanced ourselves out with what you could equate to as unity. That doesn't even exist.
Honestly,
even saying
who
it,
is our Prime Minister? No, but still, who is our Prime Minister? Is that going to be changed tomorrow or next week?
Whenever it is, right? Yeah, that's right.
I didn't vote for him. I'm pretty sure all the Liberals and Labours and everyone else didn't vote for him. So how the hell, again,
he stepped up
you can
because
be
the other
Prime
guy
Minister
was...
without...
Exactly.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. So he stepped up into the role, even though he wasn't voted in, only because his entire party voted out the other leader, going, well, maybe you're too centre for us, right? You keep watering down everything we want to achieve, like we ignore climate change. They're probably flat earthers. And I say that in jest. We want to build more coal. Got to put more coal-fired and power plants out there, clearly because it's better. And this polluting business, don't worry about that. We don't pollute like 0.5% of the world's output, so it doesn't matter, right? And I'm saying this in jest. And because he was saying, I don't think we should put coal out there, I think we should concentrate on renewables, and I really do think climate change is a thing, they go, no, you can't be leader anymore. We'll just step this other guy up who's basically our puppet, right? And I really have a hard time when the donations from big coal, and I'm really not talking about you, Gina, right? I'm not saying you're big. There's nothing there. I'm saying, like, we talk about big pharma, as in pharmaceuticals, and I'm talking about big coal as an industry. So big coal supports both parties equally with like $500 million worth of political donations. And I think money should be taken out of that. So as a poor performance indicator, I think they're kick the can down the road, do nothing, climate change is rubbish. Even though we're cooking in our own skins here in Australia in summertime, and the average temperature is going up, and I don't know anyone who can say that if the average temperature goes up, it's not climate change. I have a problem with that. So the other point is our own personal expectations. So if you had a dream state in which you woke up and found that you weren't living in that dream state, equating to the belief system that you were taught by schools and the media and the government and all of your interacting, your family and everybody, that says that if you work damned hard at something, you can achieve it, and there's a financial benefit, and you too can have that house with the picket fence and the 2.3 children and, you know, maybe 2 or 3 motor vehicles, and you can have a good job and you can, well, if your expectation was that and you compare that to where you are, you may not match. And I suspect very few people would have exceeded that expectation.
But wait, there's more. No, but wait, there's more.
But wait, there's more.
Yeah.
My wallet's in the car.
I was just saying, but wait, there's more. The taxes on the car, the taxes on the house, the schooling fees for the children, and your wage just does not increase.
Yeah,
It's so funny.
So even if you're a doctor in this country, they froze Medicare payments to doctors so that our health system, which I talked about in the first hour, our health system has a certain rate for any treating doctor to be able to charge this back, and they get paid by the government. So when we get serviced by them, they get to charge that to the government. It's all registered and all that, and it's scrutinized and all that business. But they've been holding back the increase on those fees just because they wanted to spend that money on something else. See, because what they don't admit, right, is the government doesn't admit that they're so cash strapped and cash poor that they can't afford anything, because they've hollowed out the middle class and offshored it. So the money that was going to go into that middle class no longer went into that middle class, which funds the government, because the rich don't pay any tax and neither do the poor in direct income taxes. Yes, they pay taxes through GST, which is goods and services tax, the sales tax, for instance.
Or do they?
They do, but the poor have to pay it anyway, and the rich don't care that something's 10% more expensive. So those get pushed back to the state governments and split up in a way that doesn't seem financially beneficial to anyone but Queensland, or Western Australia for that matter, and where Victoria and New South Wales are robbed of the majority of robbed of their entitlement, and it's pushed out to... Have you seen how much state construction is funded by GST in Queensland? It's insane.
What about cigarette taxes that had to go up? What about the beer taxes? What about...
Oh, that's right. If you want to stop something, you put more taxes on it till it becomes unaffordable. All that happens is you make people poorer because they'll still take it. Right? If beer went up to $90 a case, I'd still drink it. I'd have a hard time drinking it, but I'd still drink it, right? Because I remember when it was $20 a case, and now it's like $60 a case. Up to, right? Right, Paul?
Well, I've seen that actually happen, so
yeah, me too.
About that one, you know, and it's probably going to go up a little bit more. But in our way that we can compensate is we can make our own bloody distills and just shut up, you know. You can't keep the Australian down for too long. Now, Pauline Hanson was saying she wants to dilute the gun laws. No, I don't exact on that one. If you've handled semi-auto weapons and this and that, the other, and you can say that you're allowed to use them and this and that, and proved it for over 20-something years, and it only takes one bullet to blow your own brains out. It doesn't take us ours. But yeah, like I'm saying, shotguns and restricted magazine capacity. 5 shots for a semi-auto. That's fine. Especially for rimfire. That'd be okay, but the laws are still there that you can still get them in Australia. You just have to be a primary producer or
that's right.
a professional shot or whatnot. There's not
just
a
trying
law
to restrict it for the majority of people, right?
Well,
but
honestly,
it means it's still there. You're right.
Yeah, I wouldn't give anybody a handgun willy-nilly, a pistol in any way, shape or form. That'd be under strict guidelines, which there are. And I'm lucky enough to have the license of such. So, it doesn't faze me in that roundabout way. But you've got to participate. You got to, yeah. And that dude, what we heard of, just nutcase, and there are nutcases everywhere. And yeah, he's never met a Muslim person apparently, or whatnot, as far as I could tell. And,
well, I found
you know,
I found a photo of him apparently in Pakistan, and I thought maybe just maybe the alleged story is not the true story. Maybe the narrative doesn't match the story. I'm not questioning whether it existed or not. I'm only questioning the narrative. Maybe that isn't exactly what occurred. Sort of like 9/11 and the Pentagon, or Building 7, or some other events like the Gulf of Tonkin, or the Bay of Tonkin, was a false flag to get the US involved in the war, or Poland's false flag by Hitler to engage in a war. I become suspicious when it just happens to match a certain, tick boxes. But Paul, this is the message. That thing that we're talking right now about is the media narrative is a great example of that. So
that's right. It's not my narrative. It's
No.
what they've been trying to brainwash us all, and that's totally wrong. But although heads off and hands off go to New Zealand on the way they actually pulled it off nicely, and
it was very smooth and it was very quick.
Yep.
And now you're not allowed to have semi-autos over there.
Yeah, which is actually should have been. If you're a good enough shot, you only need 2, really.
That's right. Boom, boom. That's it. That's how quickly you can get them off. Look, the thing that I'd like to suggest to people, right? So this is still to do with depression. How do you deal with it? It's a very tough subject, and it's a personal thing that's happening from your perspective only to you. But in England, there's 70 million people where it's only happening to them. And this is my point. How can it be happening to 70 million people concurrently if it was only
at the same time
their own problem? Right? If it's their own perception of the way things should be, and it's not like that, where do we go wrong? Was it the wrong message? Is it social media not doing the right job? Is it the lives we live? Did we not meet our own expectations, right? All of those things. Is it the people in the world who are being so awful to us, where we can't help but to be able to maybe become a little bit introverted and introspective and not see that we're doing the right thing? However, how do we deal with it? And the easiest of all of the ways, besides talking to professionals, because that's the first step of all of this, is getting back to basics and reprogramming yourself so that you're more like Neo from the Matrix and who has the ability to dodge bullets. So that was where the segue came from there, where by being able to filter the information for what it really is into 2 piles, lies and truth. Because I think those 70 million people in England are more likely only depressed because of maybe the media narrative. Maybe they don't like...
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe that's the true cause, and the outcome is your whole population is taking drugs to make themselves feel better because I'm giving them a bad message. Like, the news isn't a good news, right? The 6 o'clock news on television isn't... Oh, guess what? Today, a guy jumped off his roof and actually flew in the air. Right?
Oh, that'd be funny.
Yeah.
As long as someone didn't follow him, otherwise that'd be a great joke.
No, that would be terrible. Maybe it was, a guy, someone invented a way to live without money. Imagine the lift of weight off everybody's shoulders if suddenly we didn't need any money at all. I'm not saying it's against capitalism, and I'm not a fascist, and I'm not a communist or a socialist. I'm just saying if there was something that relieved those 70 million people of the pressure that they've put on themselves that made their lives better. And now that's only in England. I have to say probably here there's probably 8 million. And in America there's probably more than 100 million people taking antidepressants.
Okay. Yeah. Well, depression can come in many forms. I'm actually depressed at the moment. Well, mildly depression. But I don't need anything to come over it, because I'm already on painkillers. So
there you go. So this was my only point was, and if the take-home message is, which I'd like it to be, have a look around you, have a look what you can filter for lies and truth. You don't have to act on anything except for just understanding, I love the phrase, from whence they came. Understand who's giving you the lie or truth. Is the sign you're seeing telling you the truth, like, bridge out in front of you, or, form one lane, or no parking, whatever those indicators are, but in a social environment, see how they're affecting you. Measure it against how you feel after you've seen it, and see whether that's changed you. Because what I'm seeing here is, I think, like, our brains are smarter than we are. I'll give you that straight away. And
yeah, I understand what you're saying. Is social depression is a status quo of, like we said, the puppy syndrome. Then you've got the pain scenario of depression, which people have still active
debilitating.
Minds, debilitating. Yes, depression, or well, not quite. Debilitating pain.
Debilitating, I mean, in a way that the pain never goes away despite being medicated. The pain is still there, it hurts, and no one seems to have an answer.
Well, no, not really.
Well, I have that in my shoulder,
no,
right?
Yeah, I've got it in my shoulder too, and my bloody leg. They're called screws that are stuck in there. But anyway, I understand. But the pain scenario of depression is less than the mental depression. Now, that has to be logically seen, because a pain one can actually go to the mental side and then come back, quicker than, just the mental depression, which is can be much worse. And symptoms can be physical, and that's no good. So anyone with depression should actually see other people and talk about it.
Absolutely. Like, the first step is seeking medical attention and professional consultation. I think that's the first step. But they won't tell you how to fix your problem. You really need to discuss that further with more professionals for that to occur and work for you. Look, the last point I want to make is the Mueller report, right? Wasn't that the guy's name, Mueller? Mueller report that said Trump wasn't guilty of collusion with Russia. Did you read that, Aussie Paul?
No, I didn't.
Oh, okay.
But I heard a little bit about it.
Yeah. Well, they said that he wasn't guilty, right? But CNN kept saying, well, the report said he wasn't, but, the jury's still out on it. You what? You mean you're saying you don't trust the report? Maybe, CNN? Fox is going, woohoo, guess what? Trump's not guilty. That's the end of the story. They're not running a story saying, well, even though the report said he wasn't guilty, we're still sort of thinking he's guilty. Surely he's got to be guilty of something, right? That's what CNN is doing. And that's the message.
But the funny part about Trump, though, is everything that he'd done was already out in the open, and they still voted him in. So,
well, I'm not saying he's the president that I would want to have. I'm thinking
like him. I actually like him.
I know, me too. I don't care. It's not my country. But I'm thinking the message platform that he got voted in on, he's really given a hard go to try and make work. And I think that if other prime ministers and leaders of other countries and put as much effort into trying to get something through as he is, I think we might be living in a better place. Trying to make the deal right for you, well, he's definitely got that, skill. And I have a really hard time with it. When you look in England, they can't even agree on the rules to exit an agreement. Like
that's so funny.
Imagine if that was a divorce settlement, right? Which is pretty much equates to what it is. So who's going to get what? I don't want what you've said. Well, what do you want? Well, I don't really know. But maybe if I had the vase on the mantelpiece, you can't have that. Oh, well then there's no deal then if I can't have that. But you said you didn't know what you wanted until I said vase on the mantelpiece. Well, you only brought my attention to it. Now that I know it's there, I can't look anywhere else. But that was you gave that gift to me. Well, it doesn't matter. I don't care. What about the kids? And that's like Ireland, right? And Scotland. Surely we can do something for them. Oh, there's nothing we can do for them. Then you ask them, oh, we want these things. Can we have those? Oh, no. Well, I don't. Maybe you can't have it. I don't know. You can't have both. You can't have everything at once. All they had to do is say, we'll just discuss the deal after we've left. Then, how's that? Because we're leaving anyway. Name one thing, and we can give you one thing. It's like having kids in a car and go, well, I want Macca's and I want KFC and I want Hungry Jack's and I want this. We're only going to one place. What do you want? And then they'll name their thing that they want. So maybe she should have just said, instead of resigning, I think she's going to resign over this. But maybe she should have just said, just tick off the things you want and we'll do a blind vote and all those things you'll get. That's it. Close. You only get one thing each.
She is resigning.
I know she is.
She is resigning. That's funny as, And the funny part about it is, why do we care? In Australia especially. Oh, well, actually, I know the reasons why. Because BHP and all the other stuff that are over here.
British Petroleum.
That's right. And all the other ones, and Exxon and all that. Mate, if we closed our borders, half of the bloody people would, the politicians will go, oh my God, why the hell? And I think
the music started. So
okay.
There's the end of Shiny Side Out for March 31st. Take care, everyone. And
thank you very much.
Thank you, Aussie Paul, for joining me in the second hour. Thank you, everyone listening. And stay tuned for a roundtable with Jer Bear. You should become part of this like I did when I started. Take care, everyone.